But yeah, so
So I just the reason I just wanted to catch up with you is I'm doing this walk obviously, and I thought it would be a really good idea if we could just get an idea of what it is, what people are doing as I go along in different parts of the country, and I'm aware of your project, but I have to be honest, I don't know very much about it. So what is it that you're actually doing?
cool. Basically, the idea is I could show you some pictures. I did a talk with London Conservation Volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
which might be quite nice, just because otherwise it's me talking,
That's okay.
and I find that quite hard to follow myself. But
One day I'm going to come down and have that clotted cream
yeah,
jam. You
yeah,
guys have it the cream on first, is that right?
no, outrageous suggestion. The jam on first in Cornwall,
Okay.
cream on first in Devon.
All right.
And obviously we have the near neighbour kind of rivalry, but
Mhm.
yeah. So I do have some nice pictures. So this is from Paddy Saunders'
Okay.
guide. You've probably Bodmin somewhere in the middle here.
Yeah.
So a lot of things are quite coastal in Cornwall
Hmm.
because of our lovely sort of coastal habitat. The problem with Junior Land's End to John O'Groats is you go straight down the A30, which is, it's just straight down the middle, and maybe not the nicest bit of Cornwall, but there you go. Yeah, so when we're working in the Foy Valley, it's not the nice coast, it's actually this kind of agricultural grazing landscape that we're working on.
Okay.
So although for bees, a lot of the special places in Cornwall are coastal, we're working on agricultural land, which is mostly pasture. So the southwest is very pasture dominated, with some horticulture, which is a sort of relatively small fraction, but it's quite high value. So there's lots of cauliflowers, courgettes, daffodils, potatoes,
Okay.
that kind of thing. But the Foy Valley project, we're working with a model that was developed by the University of Exeter.
Hmm.
So which they actually have a campus in Penryn. So
Hmm.
this is on the South Cornwall coast. So it's Juliet Osborne, who's been working on bumblebees for a long time with Dave Goulston amongst others. So they developed this model which basically models what happens to bumblebee populations in the landscape.
Okay.
It's quite complicated. It's incredibly detailed. It's really impressive. So basically it models a bumblebee colony through its life cycle, but it's linked. What makes it really interesting is it's linked to real landscapes.
Hmm.
So you can put your little computer bees into a real landscape, and basically depending on what's in that landscape, it has different values for bees.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the patches in the landscape, so if it's something like oilseed rape, that does one flowering burst, and then there's not much else. And then for a sort of semi-natural habitat, you have these different layers of wild species, and what happens is the amount of value in that habitat patch depends on the number of flowers for each species, and then how much pollen and nectar that species provides. So so it's really interesting.
Yeah, so you can, with obviously doing it on the ground will take much longer to actually plant all these things and see what's happening. So you've got a computer model where you can say, okay, well, if we planted all these things at this different time, then this is the food sources that we can provide.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically, and you can make little experiments and you can try it out for years. So you can look at the impacts on bumblebees for years. And you could say, if you wanted to say to a farmer, well, if you put in a field margin, this will happen. If you put in an entire wildflower meadow, this will happen. And you can do that before they actually have to dig anything out and plant it. So it's really it's got a lot of potential. And so what we're doing in the Foy Valley is that's where we are. So you probably
Okay.
let me zoom in. Oh, so oh, too far. So the A30 sort of goes just there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're trialing the models. So I'm collecting information from the landowners who are the project partners. So we're really lucky in that the project partners sort of got together with the University of Exeter and the Bumblebee Conservation Trust. So it's very much a sort of partner sort of driven project as well. To see how well the model actually predicts bumblebees in real life landscapes. So yeah, so it's there's a nice picture of
That's lovely.
So yeah, that's from one of my bee walk transits.
Oh, fantastic! That looks amazing.
It's so basically the idea is that we look and run the model, predict the number of bumblebees in a specific patch of habitat, and then I've been going out and doing bee walks to see whether those whether the numbers that the model is predicting bear much resemblance to the reality of what we see on Bee Walk.
Okay, so how long is the project running for then?
It's a 3-year project, okay. So this is our first year.
Okay.
But Kathy had done some pre-collecting of data, but I think we finish in 2023.
Okay, so you've got a few springs, summers, autumns to do your bee walks and to see what the impact is going to be.
Yeah, so it's great. I mean, I'm only half time, okay. So I just look at like the amount of outreach some of the bigger projects have done, and I'm like, woo! And then I remember that they've got a lot more people.
Absolutely.
So that's the sort of the main goals, and then we're also planning to collect sort of the local data on the floral resources in different habitats so that we can improve the model by using locally collected data and see what difference that makes, which is something that's ongoing. And then sort of the other sort of goal is to sort of use it to help farmers and land managers decide what sort of bumblebee friendly activities they might like to carry out and how much that will affect the productivity of their farm. So hopefully sort of helping them to maybe carry out.
I mean, that's really useful information that they would not be able to gather in any other way.
Yeah, I think it's really good. And I think sometimes people, even things which probably seem quite obvious, people in the Bumblebee Conservation Trust or people who have an interest in bumblebees, sometimes people just might not think about. So it can be relatively simple actions that people can do. So I've just gone through quite an interesting process of talking to our project partners about what land management sort of different options they might be interested in, and lots of people are interested in multi-species lays, which is probably an old thing that's now become a new thing. So instead of planting very species poor agricultural grasslands when they plant temporary lays, which are normally just ryegrass, sometimes with a bit of white clover, but quite often purely grass, so there's no resources for bumblebees. These multi-species lays have a variety of different herbs in which can flower and also can have different benefits for cows, like helping prevent liver flukes and have benefits for soil carbon and all sorts of things. So that's something that people have said that they're quite interested in. So what I'm doing is gathering the data to sort of put that into the model and then look at what a difference that would make in terms of bumblebee populations. So,
it's not just hitting pollinators then, it's helping the farmers and the animals as well, and the land.
Yeah. So it's quite an interesting one. We're lucky to have some people who are working on that specific habitat, in great depth in Cornwall. So that's that's really handy because they're collecting a lot of the data that we can use. But we've also sort of, when I'm putting the information into the model, when Grace and Matthias, who wrote the model, when they developed it, they used they had a set of kind of standard habitats that were based on data that was collected, I think in Sussex. So they've got a sort of woodland habitat, they've got a semi-natural grassland habitat, they've got a hedge habitat, that kind of thing. But obviously, it's quite a lot of work to collect this information. So they've got a list of, I can't remember how many it is, probably 7 of the commonest habitat types. But for example, there's a lot of interest at the moment in things like wetland mosaics, sort of around for the kind of multiple benefits that they have. So if you have a wetland mosaic in an area of slightly unproductive farmland, so you allow willow scrub and sort of wetland herbs to develop, that could be a really beneficial habitat for sort of numerous natural capital reasons like flood control, carbon storage, all sorts. So what one of the things I'm interested in is then collecting data about those habitats and how they benefit bees. So, and then we can add that into the model. So we're always making the model sort of more useful, and we're trying to make the data more available. And for some of that, I have sort of asked Sinead for some of the Calon Wen data they've had about wet pastures and that kind of thing, because I don't have the data yet. But obviously they've been collecting some floral resource data, so they've kindly let me use that for some things. But then for their project, I can also take their data and plot it and look at the potential long-term differences as well. So
that's absolutely fascinating. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, it must be. I mean, I can imagine it's quite technical. It takes a lot of time and effort to get the results to come out the other end. But what you get out must be absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's good fun. You get some. I don't know if I put any graphs in here. Yeah, so these are a couple of.
Oh wow! Okay.
One that I ran for one of our project partners. So this is their current sort of farming practice, and these ones show the amount of nectar produced by different habitats. So you can see that in their current sort of farming practice, the woodland is providing quite a lot of the nectar, and then they've got some super ambitious plans to do sort of natural capital focused management, and that includes wildflower habitats like wildflower meadows and wildflower margins. And you can just see like the axes on these graphs are the same. You can see that the amount of nectar provided is it goes up loads and then also extends. And you can, this I think is total, so she says, not confidently. So some habitats provide more nectar per square metre of habitat than others, which you can also sort of create graphs to demonstrate. But this is some output on what happens to the buff-tailed bumblebee population. So the baseline scenario is in red, and this is the number of colonies per kilometre squared, and they start off the same because I start the model off with a certain number of bumblebee queens. And then this is run over 10 years, and as you can see, as time goes on, they sort of differentiate more and more. Until after about 10 years, I think the number of colonies per kilometre squared have pretty much doubled in that scenario. And this one is the total number of adult queens, and you can see sort of the number of adult queens kind of throughout the year, which obviously drops off at certain points. But you can see that by sort of 10 years, I think that was even more. That's over double the number of adult queens.
That's amazing. And like we said earlier on, you couldn't get, you could get that information in 10 years' time.
yeah. But I think it's the plans that the University of Exeter sort of had for it was always very much for it to be used as a kind of decision support tool. So that's what they've always sort of previously said, is that these numbers are relative. So it's saying so I think Grace has always been quite careful about saying, they don't know how well these numbers necessarily represent bees in the landscape, but this is like a comparison between the two. So I guess the idea is quite often when you take these things to farmers, you can have three scenarios, and hopefully if you look at this and like the gold standard scenario, it sort of inspires you to take a bit more action.
Yeah.
But we are trying to see how well it reflects real life, and this is what I'm aiming for. So the number of visits estimated by bee steward, and then the number of visits recorded on Bee Walk, using a real life landscape. So I'm predicting in that very patch of woodland, and then I'm counting bees in that very patch of woodland. So you'd want to have like a 1-to-1 line, and I've switched my axes around, so now I've got a number of bees seen and number of bees estimated. And the first sight I did is like these 3 dots down here, and I was like really excited. I knew that it wasn't quite. So these are slightly further, but to be honest, in a modelling context, I'm still actually quite impressed. I thought they would be better. So that, and this is using the standard bee steward habitats, not the locally collected data. So that's part of the plan, is to see whether using locally collected data sort of improves that. So
yeah, I mean it's early days, and what we'll see is obviously a very straight line going all the way up. Perfect.
Yeah. That would be the ideal, but yeah, I think so.
Absolutely brilliant. That Roz,